Today we're going to discuss 7 insurance coverages that general contractors need to at least be aware of to make sure they properly protect their business. Hi, my name is Ryan Hanley. I'm the founder of Rogue Risk, where we do insurance differently, specifically by giving you knowledge and information to make the right insurance decision. Now, when it comes to general contractors versus artisan contractors, general contractors have a lot of unique exposures, and that comes in several different layers. One, oftentimes general contractors are dealing with the creation of a building, which comes with its own set of hazards. There are also several layers of contractual liability that are unique to general contracting businesses. Now, you may or may not have a client that's above you in terms of the contractual hierarchy, in so much as they are dictating down what's actually going to be built and paying for it in many cases. And then from you, the general contractor, down to subcontractors and vendors that are assisting in the building of whatever structure you're putting together. So here are the coverages that you need to be aware of. First and foremost is your property exposures. Now, this is going to be your materials on the job site, as well as the physical structure as it starts to take shape. Pretty straightforward stuff, but you want to make sure that you know whether you have a basic form policy, a broad form policy, or an open/all risks policy, because that's going to either narrow or widen the band of potential hazards that will trigger a claim and ultimately allow you to be reimbursed financially. The next is inland marine coverage. Inland marine coverage is commonly associated with builder's risk. So if you've ever built a building or done a full rehab or added an addition onto a structure, you may have needed to acquire builder's risk coverage. Additionally, inside of inland marine coverage is going to be your contractor's equipment. So the property part of your policy and the inland marine / contractor's equipment portion of your policy are often two separate coverage segments. So do not just assume that the equipment that you're using, both your tools and any machinery, do not assume that equipment is automatically going to be covered under the property section of your policy. It most likely is not. You're going to have separate sublimits for equipment and machinery, and you want to make sure that you're aware of what those are, so that if anything happens to that stuff, you get reimbursed financially. The next coverage that you need to think about isn't actually an insurance coverage, it's bonding. And for surety bonds, these are bid bonds, performance bonds, all types of different bonds that deal with the fiduciary responsibility that you have to another partner. When you're taking on a large project, oftentimes the city or municipality that you're working in and or the client or the potential owner of the building down the line is going to want some form of bonding, and you want to make sure that you have that in place. Bonding doesn't have to be hard to get. It does require some financial statement work, and you want to make sure you're working with an agent that has done bonding before and has a good quality bonding partner and a carrier, but bonding is a big part of being a general contractor. The next coverage that you want to think about is premise liability. So now we're getting into slip, trips, and falls. Someone comes onto the work site and gets hurt. This would be third-party bodily injury or physical damage that happens on the actual job site itself, and it is commonly this is the coverage that we commonly think of when we think of purchasing insurance, and is widely associated with general liability, even though technically it's not the same thing. The next is completed operations. So this is going to be after you've finished either a segment of the building or the building or structure itself. You want to make sure that you have liability in place for completed operations. So this means after you've finished up, removed your equipment, if something then happens that you can be found responsible for, you want to make sure that you have coverage in the event that a wall falls down, or there was something faulty in the wiring, or the entire second floor plumbing system bursts and destroys the first floor of the building after you walk out. God forbid these things happen, and most likely they won't if you're doing your job and you're experienced and know what you're doing. But if it does, completed operations liability is going to be the coverage that's going to respond for you. All right, the fifth coverage to consider is contractual liability. This is going to be the liability between you and your subcontractors. Now, it's very important when it comes to contractual liability to make sure that any subcontractors that come onto a job site have their own certificates of insurance, that they have their own workers' compensation policies and any other policies associated with what needs to be done, that you have those certificates, that you are named as an additional insured, that the subcontractors have policies in force, and that you are keeping a record of those policies. That way, you are not on the hook. And if you can get primary non-contributory language on those certificates, then the subcontractor's policies will actually respond first, which is a good thing for you and your policies. The next, pretty straightforward, auto insurance liability. Commercial auto is very important. If you have vehicles that the business owns, they need to be insured by the business. You need to have a commercial auto policy. Pretty straightforward, but what you don't want to have is, as much as you can avoid it, is employees of your business driving their own vehicles around. You don't want to have an uninsured vehicle. Obviously, there's a lot of things that creates problems with the DMV. And a lot of times what happens there is a vehicle may be used by the business, but is actually titled and registered to an owner or an executive in the business, and there can be some issues there having to do with who is the actual owner and who's it registered to, and that can have some issues when it comes to the state, but not a big deal. Those are pretty straightforward things to figure out. Make sure you have commercial auto policy if your business owns vehicles. If it doesn't own vehicles and employees do use their vehicles, then hired and non-owned auto is a coverage that you want to consider. Last, but certainly not least, workers' compensation. Now, when it comes to general contractors, workers' compensation can be a nightmare. This has to do with the hammer clause and labor law and scaffold law issues, especially if you're in New York State, if you're in Vermont, Connecticut, or Pennsylvania, some of these other states in the Northeast, then it's not as big. Not all the laws that are in New York that make workers' comp very difficult in New York, not all those laws extend out to all the states in the Northeast. However, if you have employees, you have to have comp. If you have subcontractors on a job site that you are managing, you have to have workers' comp. The state is going to come in, they're going to audit you. When they do, they're going to be looking for places where work was performed, where payments were made, and comp was not covered. There wasn't an appropriate amount of premium paid to capture those payments and work performed. And I have seen some nightmare audit scenarios because workers' comp policies were not set up properly. You need to work with a workers' compensation specialist. This is where Rogue can come in and be of extra value to you. Obviously, we can help you with everything that we've discussed so far, but workers' compensation in our Rogue Risk 365 program is where we can really take it to the next level and make sure that you do not get hit with a huge audit bill at the end of the year, that you do have proper systems in place, that you do have some frontline nurse triage and other resources at your disposal to keep your workers' compensation premiums down and avoid that large workers' comp audit bill at the end of the year. So, okay, that's a lot of information, but this, when you're doing general contracting work, when you're creating buildings, when you are in charge of multiple subcontractors, and especially if you're handling multiple projects at any given time, having the right insurance in place is of the utmost importance because of all the moving parts and all the various aspects of your business that can cause significant financial loss. So if you have questions, we would love to work with you. Give us a call, 518-960-6600. You can visit us online at roguerisk.com, or I'm sure there's a link or a email or a form somewhere around this video that will allow you to contact us. Whichever way you choose, we look forward to working with you.